probably talk the better part of the day, so I'm going to try to move through my thoughts and then open it up for group discussion or questions. But because early on, when the 53 Corvette was manufactured, there was no Corvette hobby. A Corvette was a car that, just like today, you buy a car, you drive it, okay, it's a sports car, and we enjoy that sports car. But I look at a hobby as something that you have mutual association. We get together now in these great big shows, and we worship the car, we drive them, we do a lot of things with the cars. And I try to figure out, this caused me to do some thinking, when did this hobby really start? Looking back, my first Corvette was a 60 and 62. I wasn't in a hobby, I just knew I wanted a Corvette. What did I do with it? I drag raced it. I had a body that needed a lot of attention. I just got out of college, and instead of going into a workforce to support a family, I didn't have a family. I lived at home, so I went to work at a body shop for half a year just to learn. You can't hire me, by the way. Yeah. Dennis does fantastic work in Philadelphia. Dennis and Larry with Alan's body. You'll see his silver Speedster over on display, and I could say without reservation, the best body on any of the Speedsters in the region is probably about 500 man-hours or so, sanding and blocking and making sure everything's perfect. It's just a gorgeous creation. But that wasn't a hobby. It was just a car, That's the way that started. I went from car to car. To see outside a 69 that I bought new. It was my first new Corvette, and somehow or other, I let it go 12 years ago with 9,740 or 50 miles on it. So obviously, somewhere after 1969, I discovered hobby. Hobby to me back then was, oh, by the way, that car out there resided 2 miles from here, and I just picked it up, bought it back when I came out to the show on Tuesday. So and it's killer. I mean, it's everything that this car had when I sold it, every little idiosyncrasy. The guy warned me, he said, you might not like driving this car. The shifter seems to be pretty tight. It's a little tight when I changed it from the long thread to the short thread. I never could figure out how to loosen it up. It's deja vu. It's really kind of fun. But with that car, I started to realize that there's a lot of things you can do. Showing started, and I'm going to tell you more of the East Coast culture. I'm pretty much aware of the national Corvette culture, but you guys are really more into the West Coast culture, so you can probably educate me. You've got the WSCC, which I don't know when it started. We've kind of got the NCCC, which is National Council of Corvette Clubs. I wish I knew when these clubs started, but probably would say sometime in the 60s, maybe the mid-60s, maybe the late 60s. So there were organizations. Were clubs, but they probably spent, by the way, Corvette News, that started in 1957. To my way of thinking, that was like the earliest indication there was such a thing as a Corvette hobby. A publication for owners. And all of a sudden you see, well, gee whiz, there's people all over the world, and all over the country anyway at that point, that had this mutual interest. So you said, this is neat. Maybe I'm not unique in this fact. Then in the, like I say, probably the late 60s, showing became really prevalent. One of the earliest shows that I was aware of was a club by the name of Delaware Valley Corvette Club in Jenkintown, Pennsylvania. And their first show was 1969, which corresponded with my purchase of my 69 Corvette. So I attended their first show, got blown away by a car with a perfect paint job. It was a Barry Hacker job. You guys are familiar with that. And I think it was done with a motion rear window, which was out our way, like a fastback rear window. And it was the stock class. So back then, there was a lot of liberties taken with what stock was. Today, you're into WB bolts and the proper plating and that sort of thing. But back then, it was like anything goes. So I've got a brand new 69 Corvette, which was polished and didn't do anything at all. Eventually, and then the car's a good indication in that area. Now I really kind of into the NCRS mindset as far as the way the collector cars are. I love to see the originality, but I also believe that's not at the exclusion of the individual taste. If he wants to have a race car, if he wants to have an over-restored car, if he just wants to have a driver that's dirty, there's something for everybody in the hobby today. But this particular car, 69, I'm not looking forward to getting it home. I did it the NCCC way. First show I went with NCCC, they told me you better get some black paint on your undercarriage, because I hit all of the stenciling and the shim marks and that sort of thing. Little black paint over calculated nuts and bolts and hardware. And in fact, they thought that the inner fender panels should be painted black instead of the natural finish, so I went and did that. And eventually, that's why I sold the car. I just turned my mindset back to what did I do to this car? I kind of ruined it. Well, you can take the stuff off, especially take the time to do it, and that's what I plan on doing. Okay, where was the hobby? I really believe that one of the earliest clubs that I'm aware of was the Vintage Corvette Club. Probably a lot of you are aware of that because I think it started right up in this area with a fellow by the name of Ed Dybog. And he, I believe, focused on 53 to 55, and might have gone into like 57 Vintage. I wish I could remember exactly when that was that he started his club, but I remember in 1970 I was a member, and probably was one of the very early members of it. Somebody else started a club called Classic 53-5, and that I believe was out of Ohio. I cannot remember his name. Nolan Adams would be able to help me if he was here, because I know Nolan was a member of it. That club, as I recall, lasted for 3 or 4 years, and this was in the early 70s. Then they started the NCRS. That was 1974. 1974, the NCRS was started. The hobby, as we know it today, with the focus on originality and whatever, probably started in 1974. A lot of things in the Corvette hobby, for some reason, started in 74. And get an outline in about 10 minutes coming out here. But last night I was trying to think, where actually did this hobby start? For some reason, I'm coming up with 74. And the reason is, I think at that point we realized the cars themselves were becoming, if you will, less Corvettes than the earlier ones, the 67s with their big blocks and their gobs of power, and then the early Mako years, or whatever you want to call them, they had the power, and then along comes 1971, and you're reducing power. And why were you doing that? Because you were getting gasoline. 68 with smog control. That was really kind of like a little bit of a start of the downhill, but still the car made a lot of power, and you could always take the smog pump off and it ran fine. But then you got lower compression. You, in 1975, an unleaded fuel you had to run, and right around that 74, 75 era, I believe the hobby really started, because now we started appreciating the older cars for what they were. Maybe something was never going to happen again. With this downhill trend, it just seemed like it's a finite situation. It's 85 miles an hour speedometers and whatever. We wanted to use these cars that we had just used as regular cars before, and all of a sudden became collector cars. And 1974, again, there was a lot of things that happened. So I believe 73 was when Vet View started. As far as I know, that was the earliest Corvette publication, with the exception of club magazines and Corvette Corner, or Corvette News, right? Probably other people had the idea that Jim Prather had. I know I did. I used to think, well, wouldn't it be neat to have a singular publication directed at the Corvette people? And I thought, there's no way this would work. There's not enough of us out there that would buy the magazine. And how wrong I was. Look at the newsstands today. There were other events that happened. It's really kind of ironic. I'm looking back to the years 72 and 73. A lot of the people that are kind of at the very visible lead edge of the hobby today were just guys in their shorts out having fun at some of the Corvette activities. I can remember specifically in 1972 at a CCC convention in Atlanta. Terry McHale had a trailer, and he had a bunch of NOS wheels with him, and the wheels being the knockoffs and the 67 Polaroids. NOS put in the factory and stopped producing them, stopped supplying them to the parts department. So everybody was scattering around, myself included, buying up these sets of wheels wheels and then boarding them. I mean, they were really, really cheap at the time. It seemed like a lot of money, maybe $100 a wheel, which was fantastic. Terry, of course, went on to become quite large in the sales of not only the Corvettes, but the parts. This goes back a ways. Now it's Pro Team, so he's got very sizable visibility worldwide for the sales of Corvettes. Mike Yeager, who at the time we bonded as really good friends, and that bond's just gotten better, was a guy selling decals and patches at the back of the station wagons in 1972 again. So he starts Mid-America, and we all know what Mid-America is. Crater, again, just a guy out there walking through the trenches and enjoying the hobby, and came up with a good idea and created Betfuse Magazine. Myself, I went a different route and thought that there might be a need for Corvette shows, not Corvette shows at the time. At the time we started general swap meets because I lived right next to Hershey, Pennsylvania. It was kind of easy to emulate them, especially when they were nasty to me when I put a 54 Corvette in their show. They're not in their show, in their swap meet, and they said, it's too new a car. I had a guy with me, it was my partner, been my partner for 25 years, and said to him, why don't we start a show for post-war cars? They're narrow-sided. And that was the thought that was on Carlisle. And very frankly, it was just that easy. I mean, over a long period of time, it's grown into what it is now. We do attention to detail, but most of it was just damn dumb luck. We happened to be in the right place at the right time, in the right situation. So, a lot of examples there. John and Shirley White, back then, started a little show out in Bloomington, Illinois called Bloomington Corvette Crowd, I believe they called it back then. And I think ruined Bloomington, the granddaddy of all the Corvette shows. So again, that show just celebrated its 25th last year. So there we are again, 1973. They started that show. For some reason in the 70s, I really believe that's when the Corvette hobby started. Notes. Oh, California Gold. Some of you are familiar with that, with Jim Gessner some years ago. Right idea. Whether the timing was wrong or whether the spot was wrong, I don't know. I didn't go. But you know, California, you know, why isn't there a huge show out here? I don't know. I'm not volunteering. I don't want to do it. But I certainly was attracted by this show because, first of all, I had somebody asked to have me come. I thought that was quite an honor. But when I saw the list of people that were going to be here, just the thought of putting together speedsters, I've had some grandiose plans of my own over the years and kind of implemented some really good things happening. But to try to get every speedster together, and Skip Prenzel did a hell of a job there. I think he had one disappointment in the whole situation, a car that they went to pick up in Arkansas, and it just, the guy said, sorry, you know, we're not taking it. And after all the arrangements were made, but I really applaud them for what they put together at this event. And it seems like it's really going off great. Last night we got together and everybody that was supposed to be here is here. You know, years I've been asking John Lanefelder to come to Corvettes at Carlisle, and I get to meet him here. I'll keep trying, you know. But what a group of people. We assembled racers this year at Corvettes at Carlisle, about 30 notable racers from the very early days, 56 all the way up to 74, including Dick Goldstream from your area. And that was the most grandiose thing we've ever done. And yet, I look at what's assembled, at the people that are assembled here, between Dave Hill, Dave McClellan, Dick Goldstrand. It's just a super list of who's who. So people are willing to come to California. And again, maybe I'm underestimating the show. Maybe this is going to be a lot bigger than I really expected. My wife and I got here a couple days ago on Tuesday and really enjoyed our time out here. But it just seemed like it was going to be a fairly small show, and I expected something a lot bigger. And we certainly have that potential to, in California, to have a huge show. I guess this show's been going on for quite a while. I don't know.
This is the sixth, I believe.
Sixth. Okay. So it's in a growing situation. I would imagine San Jose is probably a very, very good place to do a show in California. The other thing, I'm getting ahead of myself, but I want to eventually get into the future, you know, what we're looking at in the future. And why not? I've already opened the door. 2002 or 2003, I guess the jury's still out, but I think it's going to be whatever Chevrolet says is what everybody else does. I was thinking the birthday was going to be 2003 of the Corvette. Then the Corvettes are going to, you know, just sorts of visibility. A lot of us probably are at Laguna Seca and Pebble Beach. Monterey Historics back in '87 when Chevrolet was 75 years old. And of course, you know, what do you think of when you think of racing? It was Corvettes. So some of the best Corvettes in the country, Rich, you've been racing before and after that at Laguna Seca, but there was this SR2 and Grand Sports and all the real important racing Corvettes were there. In the year 2002, I'm just going to assume that's when it is now. This is not an official announcement, but I've heard a lot of things this weekend about 2002 being the time Chevrolet's going to start it. I believe it'll be started at Monterey. It might not, but my gosh, when that happens, there's an opportunity out here for the whole Corvette world, literally, to come to California. So planning, you know, I'm certainly going to pass that on to the club. I'm hoping that something really, really big happens, and it'll certainly be a catalyst for the major West Coast show. Corvettes at Carlisle certainly takes care of the East Coast pretty darn well. Bloomington Gold is huge in the Midwest, and obviously the Granddaddy in some ways more sizable than Carlisle. Carlisle's more sizable than Bloomington in other ways. But, gentlemen from Route 66 Corvette show, first year show this year, done at a beautiful facility in Joliet, Illinois. And again, inception of it this year. We'll see how it goes, but it's something that's quite unique out there, and that they do it at a racetrack. And I'd love to have a racetrack either on grounds or close by Carlisle, just as possible. So I think they're starting with a great formula out there, and looking for a great success out of Route 66. Only wish them the best. But again, in my notes, I'm saying, you know, why the void in California? Maybe it's just I don't know. Maybe you guys do a lot with showing out here, and maybe it's a lot of club stuff. But you know, there seems to me to be an opportunity for a very, very large show out here. And again, I made a mistake. I came out here with a show we produced at Carlisle. We went to San Diego, produced a general swap meet at Jackalope Stadium. It was the wrong place. Why would anybody do that? I don't know. The guys must be from back east and they just didn't understand what was going on. And that's pretty much true. It's, I looked at our neighbors to the west and they were fish. I looked at our neighbors to the south and it was Mexico. So, I mean, why would, and to the east it was the desert. So, you know, like, why did we do that? Well, I don't know. We just kind of, Phil and I are kind of gunslingers, especially back then. We came out and we started traveling California. We knew that LA would probably be a good place to do it, but had Pomona. I think the other show there, the Rosebud, I believe it was back then, had a show. So we didn't figure that had to be duplicated, and we really weren't that much aware of what was above LA. It certainly would have been the place to produce a swap meet, but we made our mistakes, and we licked our wounds, and we didn't come back, frankly, because it wasn't the place to do it. You think about a place like Jack Murphy Stadium as being able to handle just about any size of show. That wasn't the case whatsoever. We filled 1/3 of it the first year. We knew in about 3 years we would overgrow it, and there was absolutely no room for expansion. You couldn't go off grounds. There was no place to park and whatever. So we knew that we had a loser cooking there, so we might as well cut it when it's young instead of wasting a lot of time on it. So that was our experience in California. The other experience with that I shared with a few people early on was our swap meets. We don't have a lot to do back east, except go to swap meets, sit around, sell parts, buy parts, and whatever. You can make a Hershey into a 3-day period or whatever. Here in California, we didn't understand it. We came out, we said, we're bringing the back east swap meet to California, and the vendors looked at us like we were absolutely nuts. We brought a lot of vendors from the Midwest and the East, and they were willing to spend 3-4 days in one place. California, there is no way. They say there's too much to do. We got the mountains, we can go skiing, and we got the beaches, we can go swimming, and we got this to do and that to do. There's no way we're going to be held here for 3 days. So our reaction to that would have been to fix it the next year. We would have had a central area that was a 3-day swap meet, and we would have gone with the peripheral for people who wanted to come in for 1 day. Selling spaces for 1 day. Pomona, I guess it's the biggest show you have out here. And, to my knowledge, it's a 1-day show. I guess it's a half night, a half a day show or something. I don't understand. I tried to produce that out in Pennsylvania. Nobody would come. You know, what the hell are you doing? So anyway, it's different cultures and it's different growth and it's different things to do. That's not Corvettes. History. The museums, I think, should be discussed. museums historically are not a money-making deal. Usually somebody, it's like racing, the best way to make money in racing is to have a lot to start with. You know, it's the same thing with museums. People have tried, and people have failed. The first museum that I know of to open up with an all Corvette was Corvette Americana. That was up in Cooperstown, New York. That was a great idea. Beautiful, beautiful. I'll tell you, I was never there, but it was a beautiful, beautiful display. We really put a lot of thought into it, just couldn't make it work. And that's shut down now. The cars are being sold. Classics in Florida, their focus was Corvettes on one level, and the other level was race cars, NASCAR and whatever, because they're right at Daytona Beach. And a couple of years ago, they sold all the Corvettes, just couldn't make it with the Corvettes. And the National Corvette Museum is no secret, it's struggling. It was struggling really, really bad. I think the Corvette community has gotten behind it, and so have some very talented people on the board of directors and also the management of the museum. It certainly is a worthwhile cause. I'm sure a lot of you will support it next year with that big road tour to the museum. They need all the help they can get. And again, it's our only hope to have that kind of recognition continue it. And you know, we could say there was things that they did wrong. Perhaps the placement was wrong. I don't know. But they can't second guess a $16 million investment because you know, lift it up and move it someplace else. So they're there, and we've got to support them. Real quickly, what do we do with our cars? It's interesting. I've mentioned the showing, kind of like the stages that I went through. And I guess, again, I can speak for myself. You kind of wear out everything you do. You know, you go, you experience it, and you get beat up enough, or you have enough success, and then you got to go to the next step. And back in the early days, the showing was more cosmetic. Like I say, the modified cars seemed to have the edge on the real original cars. Then everything turned around. You know, everything that got flared became unflared, became restored, and all the nuts and bolts were replaced with the right pieces and whatever. And then you started looking at chassis. What that was the next plateau. Everybody's looking under the engine compartment, inside the car, and on the body. But whoever got down underneath the car. So it's kind of surprised me that nobody ever really got into with these lifts that are commercially available, actually lifting the car up and showing what the undercarriage is. It's interesting. It really is. But again, it's something that you kind of hit for a while. And if you're going to use the car, it's almost futile to have a perfect restoration on an undercarriage. So where is it that you should be? Where you should be is where it feels good for you. I think I've been pretty near everything I can consider in the Corvette hobby because I'm always looking for something new. Currently it's racing. I'm racing because it's, again, it's finite. I won't have that ability here in, I don't know, 5, 10, 15 more years. So I figure that's something, that's a priority. I got to do it or my skills won't be good enough to allow me to do it in the future. Showing, gave that up 15 years ago, maybe. Politics, for one thing. Politics meaning not that people would misjudge my car, because I never had that problem. You know, I didn't mind taking on the second place or the third place. And I wish everybody had that attitude. You understand your car is your car, and if you're convinced that's what you like, it doesn't matter what place you come in. I always had that outlook. The politics I always looked at was I judge a car, Chip judges a car. I make one person happy, I make all the rest of them unhappy. I don't need enemies. So I kind of gave up on that. And if you put my car in a show, then it's like I feel an obligation maybe to overlook something on a ship's car, or the other way around. Right, this guy, the other way around. You know, so you just try to I don't mind displaying cars, but that's the way it is. Something came along 6 or 7 years ago. I would say always that my best idea in life was Carlisle. Probably my second best idea. It was borrowed from a neighbor of yours, Gary Metters. Gary and his Good Guys show has no judgment. They don't judge cars. They go out and they look at these hot rods and they solicit anybody that has a name or a reason to go out and judge. It's not judgment. You go out and pick a car. And he calls it the most bitchy car, or the fastest looking and all this kind of stuff. And Gary's got his way with words, and that's the street rod. But we produced a show with Gary up until this year. years. We started a great big show in Ohio and Columbus. Once he got that facility kind of consolidated, he was not doing a whole lot of shows, at least other than that one. But I got to know Gary, and I got to know how he thought, and I really respect Gary. It's kind of neat having a business partner, you can say, that you respect him. I respect Gary all the way. But I borrowed an idea from him, and I love this idea of not judging. You just go out and you look at a car, and you say, you know, hey, that's really cool. Or I like you, you know? I like you, I like your car, you know? And whatever reason, if that's the car I picked, who the hell's ever going to say anything bad about me? Not your neighbor, and you're going to say something good about me. So this idea kind of clicked like right before one of our shows, and I got together probably a group of 20 or 25 of these celebrities that were there. When I say celebrities, I'm talking about this is where it all comes together really good. Media people, you know, people that write for the magazines, for editors. I've included now all presidents of local Corvette clubs, presidents of the national Corvette clubs. In fact, I don't have WSCC, so probably somewhere along the line this weekend I want to get information on how to reach them. I'd like to have them from them. But it's celebrities, it's racers, it's historians, it's restorers, and it's really easy to get judges that way because what I do is I feed them. I take them buffet lunch, and then assign them to go out and pick a car. And this thing, the first year, nobody understood it. So what we did is the cars came in. I had a sheet printed up. We handed it to everybody coming in. Basically, what it was for a couple more bucks, and you pay to get on the ground, your admission. If you went for 2 days with 2 people in the car, for a couple more bucks, you get in the fun display. We call it the fun display because the concept here was the opposite of fun. Obviously, is getting the ground down, and you got to clean all your tire treads and all this kind of stuff. But we don't want to see tire treads in the fun display. We want you to have fun. We want you to come in. We want you to enjoy the show. But we also want you to be a part of the show. We want your car to be there, visible to all these celebrities. It's just a natural. And I'm kind of sharing this with you all, and I would like to see, you know, I think somebody's going to pick this up on the West Coast. It only makes sense. You know, Route 66, you did the same thing. Of course, Mike Yeager with his Fun Fest, you know, came to me and said, you know, what do you think about me using that same format? I said, if you're the sponsor of our fun display, why wouldn't you use it? As a matter of fact, I would look at it that it's only a sensible thing that could be used all over the country and make it a happier place for Corvette owners. One more thing for you to do. So over the years, this is 6 years ago, we handed out those flyers, probably had 150 or 200 cars on our fun field that first year. So it was well received the first year. It's a nice sized car show. This year, last year was 1,250. I think it was like 1,400 that we had on the field this year. And we had, Rich, you were there, like probably 120 celebrities that went out and picked these cars. So everybody was happy. Nobody was unhappy when they didn't get picked. And we just give plaques. We give plaques to the celebrity, and we give plaques to the people with the cars. So it's a simplistic way of doing something, but it seems to really work. And the neat thing about it is you get incredibly good cars out there. The incredibly good cars get picked automatically, but also sometimes the incredibly, I don't want to say bad, because there's a bad Corvette, but incredibly unrestored Corvette. A couple of years ago, we had a 57 out there with every bonding strip showing because it had been stripped and every piece of damage showing. This car was in the process of restoration. He showed on the fun field. It was one of the first cars we picked. And why not? He stands out in the crowd. You got to like this guy, right? He's driving a Corvette. It was cool. But anyway, that is something that's relatively new. It's about 6 years old, and I think probably something that if you haven't tried it, you'd like. I'm going to dissect the show. Started off with fun, judging. Another thing we do out there is, how long ago this was, registry. 1990, the Corvette Challenge was over, and I'm really nutsy about the Corvette Challenge. So 1990, I had a reunion. Now, these reunions started long about then, maybe 89 or 90. We had 20 some, it was like 25 Corvette Challenge cars in attendance. It was only 86 of these cars altogether, so it was a pretty hot item back then. And as we got together and talked in a room like this, we decided that now's the time to start documenting these cars, the history of them, basically what we call it, a registry. The SAC, Shelby Owners Club, has a registry. So registry sounded like a good name. That thing has grown so big in the attendance at Carlisle. There's just like registries. They flourish. I think that same year there was a guy that came to us with an 82 Challenger collector edition. Said, I've got 4 or 5 people we'd like to park together. I think it'd be kind of interesting to have us all together. I said, that sounds like a great idea. Why don't we do that? And they went out and solicited other collector editions that came to Carlisle. Before they were done that year, they had 15 or 20 collector editions there. He went home, he started a registry. Registry, in the true sense, should be documenting the cars for historical purposes. You want to know VIN numbers, you want to know how they're operated. Of course, that particular car, whether it had a CD player or didn't, I guess it's really probably the only difference. But you really like to know, first of all, if they're authentic. So now that's spawned all these registries, the CR1 registry and what was the LT1 registry that became something else that now is the Corvette Cavalry. I mean, these are all things that have kind of been spawned by the idea of registries. Today, there's the 63 to 67 Stingray registry, the 53 to 55 Corvette registry, along with Dorn's group, along with, of course, NCRS and all that. But registries have flourished. What's happened, because we have a finite amount of room, this is going to sound funny to you, we got 82 acres, it's fenced. Our big shows, the big shows that were spawned by Hershey, probably 10 years ago, we sold out to vendors. So you had to park off grounds to come and visit our place. So that means that parking lots flourish off grounds, schools, the National Guard, Armory, those sorts of places. So the community has shared in our success, and it's become quite a proud community. And we've seen that ambulances and fire trucks and computers for the schools, and field trips for the children in school, all have been paid for through our show. The people that come and visit, and they don't want to see Chip and Bill out there collecting money for parking cars. And sure as heck don't mind seeing the PTO in school or the ambulance corps with the car, with the ambulance sitting there saying that this is financed thanks to your parking fees. So this is the kind of stuff that's worked extremely well for Carlisle. Well, this year, actually last year, we ended up with, maybe even 3 years ago, like a sellout situation in Carlisle. It's hard to imagine this, but we had to eliminate on-grounds parking for anything but Corvettes. We have a huge swap meet, over 3,000 spaces in our swap meet. That takes up probably 40% of the room to begin with. Then all these Corvettes. And by the way, you don't have to be in the fun display to park your car at your Corvette at Carlisle. We also offer all Corvette parking, which is almost just as much fun. It really was the thing that started the fun display, except you don't have the judges going out and look. But in all Corvette parking, everybody goes out and looks anyway. If you have all those Corvettes, why wouldn't you look at them? We have a what we call car corral, which is nothing but cars for sale. I mean, Corvettes for sale. Every now and then somebody tries to sneak in a Camaro or something, and I go ballistic. I'm not really approachable during shows because I've always got problems, and I got to take care of this, and I got to satisfy everybody. But boy, you cannot satisfy me by bringing a Camaro to my car corral. It just doesn't work. Or bring a '57 Chevrolet with a ZR1 motor from Seattle, Washington, all the way across the country to come to the ZR1 registry at Corvettes at Carlisle. This poor guy, and it's the nicest man I ever hoped to meet. This happened about 4 years ago. And he trailed it all the way across the country. Is it ISCA, ISCA, I think is the National Show Car Circuit. Winner in that and everything. And my son saw it first. He kind of got me aside and said, Dad, you aren't going to be happy. I already talked to Larry Murrah about this, but they've got a '57 Chevrolet on the fun display field. I said, what? So I thought I'd go out and handle this, but my dander was up. I went out, this thing was the most spectacular '57 Chevy you ever seen in your life. This guy had grafted in a 90 dashboard inside the car. It was killer. It was absolutely beautiful. But it wasn't a ZR1. So I had a talk with the gentleman, and probably was a little bit more unkind than I normally would be, but I wasn't real mean. I just said, please understand my situation. situation. It's not the ZR1 that only allow Corvettes in this field. I cannot compromise the show. And basically, he was kind of nice, and the wife was over the side. She was ready to stab me with a knife. So I said, what I'd like to do, though, is come up with a compromise situation, get you maybe across the street where it's not a fun display, but you'll probably be extremely visible. As a matter of fact, you'll probably draw people away from the fun display. Long story short, we tried that. He was ready to load up and head on back to Seattle, Washington. Well, that's not my purpose in life to have a guy, drive 6,000 miles and say, hey, I don't like you and I don't like your cars, and get out and go back west. That wasn't the goal. So eventually we kind of compromised and talked to Larry, and I said, why don't you put this car in your display as a special guest, just to show the ZR1 motor and whatever. He's not going to be available for the judge. And I gave the instructions to the celebrity judges. Damn if somebody didn't pick one anyway. So we do a parade of these winners, which is kind of neat too. I like the kind of trophy presentation where it's mobile. You get to see the car moving and everybody sits up in the grandstand. So that I had to eat crow that year. I did it again this year, and I didn't even see this car until the awards presentation. And the 53 to 55 group had probably a 63 stand delivery Chevy with a grafted on nose and a grafted on rear end of a 53 to 5 Corvette. It was really cool. It looked like the old Nomad, the experimental Nomad, but damn it, it wasn't a Corvette. But I let it in there. I didn't let it in there. It got in there, and somebody actually picked it again. So again, I ate crow again. I guess life isn't perfect, but I like it to be. Obviously, I said about the swap meet. It's huge swap meet. Gentleman there was talking about the part that he needed a bracket for his tri-power in 68 or 69. I remember my most fun. I don't have a lot of fun before that show or at the Carlisle shows because I'm working really, really hard, and I don't have time to go out and swap. Go to the swap meet, go to the car corral or anything. I'm kind of putting out fires or making things happen or satisfying our guests. And that used to be the way it was at Carlisle. But now, we've got a staff of 30, so I call it PR. PR means I go out and I support my vendors in my car corral. I go out and buy cars and I buy parts and everybody else does. I have a lot of fun. But before I was able to do that, by the way, I do not dislike Hershey for asking me that situation with 54. If I knew that was, I'd go back and thank them many times over. For 25 years we've been in business, and it's been very, very profitable and successful being having the Carlisle swap meet. But at 62 Chevy Impala Super Sport convertible, and it was a pristine car, 50,000 original miles. But there's 4 things on that car that I needed. 4 things. I made up that list. And normally I go to Hershey, and Hershey's huge. We have 8,200 spaces. Hershey has about 12,000 now. I mean, it's huge. But I have my list, so finally I had a purpose. I go to Hershey, and usually it's traipsing through mud and eating. And then whenever I find that I want to buy, that's something I really had to have, but I just didn't know it before I got there. We all have that. Where is all this stuff? It's something you had, But this particular time, I had 4 pieces to make my 62 perfect. And I went around and I went to everybody looked like they had anything Chevrolet, and I would look through their stuff. And if that didn't work, I'd ask them, this is my list for 62 Chevy. And of course, I'd cross off one item when I'd find it, and I was carrying the stuff around. I was a big shopper like everybody else. Man, I felt really good. And this is honest to goodness truth. The second from last aisle that I went to, I found the 4th item. And it was like, I couldn't have been more successful with anything in my life you can find it. I mean, at Hershey, I found everything I needed for that 62. Back then, they weren't even supposed to have that late model stuff. Probably at Bloomington Gold or at Carlisle, that part is. Now, whether you can, dig far enough to find it, and probably your smartest thing, I would think, NCRS would be to put it in the NCRS drive line and say, if you want it, I don't want you to try it.
That's a great idea. Never even thought of it.
Yeah, because these guys that have oodles of parts, it's amazing that they know what they have. They can find it. What else do we do at Carlisle to make a successful show? I'm talking shows now. I'm talking, I guess, firsthand from Carlisle. A lot of entertainment. It's funny, the swap meets are the easiest things to do. Our spring and fall shows are so slick and simple, and they're so profitable that you just can't create something like that anymore. That was the right place at the right time. We bought the facility in '81, and we had to do more. So producing specialized shows. Specialized shows help in many, many ways. It allows people that are Corvette collectors, Chrysler collectors, Ford collectors to have no specific show. They don't have to come out to those 82 acres and drudge through 8,200 spaces trying to find that rare part they need. Now, they can go to like a Ford show and look through a quarter or a third that number of spaces, but it's specifically Ford. Obviously, for the Corvette, it's specifically Corvette.
Sure. How many people go through or show up at Carlisle for that weekend?
At Corvettes?
And how many Corvettes also do you keep track of?
54,000 or how many came to the Corvette show several weeks ago.
Right.
Corvettes, we don't know. I'm asked that question all the time. I try to speculate, and we used to have aerial photos, but there's no way. I mean, just go nuts trying to count all those cars. But I say approximately 1,500 on the fun field. The parking, we know about how much room we have there. It's probably another 2,000 at least in the parking area. And then you've got the car crowd, you've got the other show field. So you've got
5,000 cars.
Yeah, that's exactly what I speculate, and it could be as many as 7,000, but I think that would be an exaggeration. And we're talking per day.
The best food anyway.
Yeah, food, I didn't even have that on my list, but that's a part of the show. You know, it's not maybe a part of our hobby. We can go places in brown bag and still have fun, but it's really nice when you do have good food. It's just another plus. Entertainment, we have the downtown parade on Saturday night, which is really neat, limited to about 450 cars. But if you don't get in the parade, you can still go downtown, and they have a band from 7 till 10, and that's a cool drill. We have a beauty contest, which we started in the very beginning. I don't go near it anymore because one year I had a problem, and it's just not my bag. But I'm telling you what, it packs the place. It's good. I mean, it's clean. It's good family deal, and we give enough money that if the girl shows it, she's gone. It just that doesn't work. That's the main thrust of what we do. We produce family events, and it's come to reward us enormously. I mean, you know, we can, as guys, if we want to go see, you know, bad stuff, there's bars to do that and whatever. But the Carlisle shows are not the place to do it. We want to make the whole family feel comfortable, especially in the summer when kids are off school and the wife is more likely to come along. It's good, clean fun. Auction, we started an auction 4 years ago with Bob Gold. Bob left Bloomington Gold. Bob's my wife and my kids is my best friend on earth. And Bob was kind of a natural for him to come to us, but I didn't really see it. I didn't really want to produce an auction because, frankly, most auctions are not something I want to get associated with. There's too much larceny. It seems like you got to have false bidding and all that kind of stuff. Not only that, if I buy a car, I like to know that car. I like to know the owner a little bit longer than then. You know, yeah, right. I like to hear its motor and see how it drives or something. But auctions are a fact of life, and there's some fantastic cars out there that are notorious, and you don't need all that kind of stuff to go with it. And then there's other cars you can buy for good prices at auction. Bob does one heck of a job at the auction. I really honestly believe it's one of the most honest auctions in the country, and we're proud of it. One thing was added here a couple of years ago, last year I guess, was a fashion show for the ladies. Again, we're trying to do things for the families. The ladies, it's just an unbelievable fashion show. We get Elfie out there, modeling clothes, and Liz Hill from the museum, and I don't know all the people, but I mean a lot of ladies, and then they just pack our big tent where we have our lunches and all. And it's really, really neat. I think all the ladies get a rose or something like that, and get some sample stuff, and just have a lot of fun. One thing I didn't put down was the kids. We have something called Kids at Carlisle. That started maybe 7 or 8 years ago, and the idea there was, heck, you have kids there. Give them a place to play. Give them some entertainment. So we do like pin the tag. It's like pin the tail of the donkey. Let's pin the tag on the Corvette and put the Corvette up on the wall and go around and do that. We have a clown. We have face painting. We have tram rides. We have the dummies called the crash dummies. They got names anyway. We have the dummies that come in and they start understanding about safety in cars and stuff like that. They also bring in the models. They judge for models. They bring in their pedal cars, electric cars, gas-powered go-kart type Corvettes. And then we have a parade for them on Sunday, and we acknowledge them all with plaques, there's no winners, there's no losers, it's just participants. So, but again, these kids are having fun. They're not coming and saying, geez, I have to look at another car part, or gosh, I don't want that food because I don't like it. They can go down there and have fun. They don't, geez, they have water balloons and, volleyball. There's just lots of things. And there's also an educational process for the kids that are a little bit older than that. The kids that are always kind of falling that crack. The ones that are like 12 to 18 years old, that, what the hell do you do with them? They're going to like pin the tag on them. They're not going to color or have their face painted. But Tom Christman from Mid-America puts on a very, very nice seminar, an educational seminar. These kids don't really quite understand the history of Corvettes or the significance, and he kind of approaches it at their level, and it's really a positive situation. So again, the Corvette hobby used to be, what was it? Before it was a hobby, you just drove your Corvette. Then it became autocrossing, showing, drag racing, road racing. So many facets has developed into a pretty complex hobby, but it offers a lot of opportunity. Whatever you want, you can find. I think that pretty much takes us to today, and I don't have a crystal ball, but personally I feel with the amount of time I've been around and I guess the depth of my involvement in the hobby maybe allows my crystal ball to be somewhat clearer than the normal person's, the people that are, new to the hobby or whatever. And I think I'd like to share my thoughts with you, and maybe you guys, girls, with me. The future, what is the future going to be? In 2002, 2003, I got ahead of myself there. I expect that year to throw the Corvette into such limelight, just like the Sluggers this year. I mean, I think the Corvette's just going to go gangbusters in the year 2002. When I say that, I think we're going to sell more damn new Corvettes than they ever sold. I think the cars that we have that will be for sale, speculators, the investors, or even just a Joe Normal who wants to sell his car, is probably going to be an excellent time to purchase. With that in mind, my personal belief, and I'm not going to sell my 53 as long as I live, but I think the 53 Corvettes that have laid dormant for so many years will come to the forefront because we're really celebrating their birthday. And I think those cars will shoot up the value dramatically. I think a guy that has a 1953 Corvette, unless he has to sell it today, would be ill-advised to sell it. I think he better wait until 2002 because I think the market will really be. And we saw that happen with L88s in 1988 when Dave Burrows did that. What is it? The Earth will shake in '88. Of course, the L88 in 1988. I mean, he had a lot of fantastic ideas on going to go, and that was probably one of the best. And the market went nuts on LEDs when that was happening. And I think we'll do the same thing with 53s. Into the future, the big events, kind of put a smile on my face thinking about this because I think that the big events can only flourish. I don't think there's any downside to it. The only downside I know for Carlisle is that we have a finite amount of room. Who would ever think that 82 acres wouldn't be enough to take care of people? This year proved that we could not accept all the Corvettes on the facility. We had to shut down our parking for Corvettes for about 2 hours on Saturday, and I didn't like doing it. So maybe what we need is auxiliary parking lots for Corvette parking. We'll make it happen somehow. Bigger's better. Bigger's better to a point. Big can get to the point where so simple big it can't be fun anymore. So maybe we're lucky we only have 82 acres. But I look forward to being bigger and better. I look for more and more people to come into the hobby. And yet, that is probably my most primary concern is the aging of our hobby. Obviously, I was in my 20s, my mid-20s. I've been over half my life in the hobby with an acute interest in Corvettes. And I will till the day I die without question. I don't know what this affliction is, but I'm happy to know it's not unique to me. We all got it. And we're all getting older. I mean, nobody's getting any younger. But I have a vision with all our shows, our spring and fall shows, the general swap meets. I'm seeing more kids come into that for some reason. When I say kids, it's kids to me, or teens, 20s, even 30s. That's a kid to me. But in our hobby, the Corvette hobby, I don't see a whole lot of that. There's a hell of a lot of reasons for that. The cars are so expensive. People of that age, especially the teens and 20s, are not fixated on cars as a collector device anymore. They're looking at computer. They want to stare at the computer screen and look at their email and whatever you do with a computer. I work on my computer and I find it an important tool, but I resist getting on the internet because I know what's going to happen. I'm not going to produce what I really want to produce. I'm going to be stuck on corresponding with everybody on the internet, or finding more things that I didn't know I needed to buy them, or whatever. I don't need to know about the internet anyway. At least not now. I've got other people in my organization that do spend a lot of time on it, and I think it's going to be an important part of our growth too. Is the internet? I don't mean to put down the internet, but I think also the internet is something that's causing people to more attention to that and less attention in the cars. A lot of us when we grew up, I'm talking about the guys my age and maybe the 10 years younger, we had a lot of different things you could do back then. Cruising coming back, thank goodness for that. That's probably one of the primary things you can do with your Corvette. But street race, no, don't do that. Man, did we do that years ago? I mean, we did. It was cool, but we can't do it anymore. You go to jail. It doesn't work. It doesn't work real good anymore. So, what's to entice the younger generation to Corvette? Again, we're trying to do our part. We're trying to identify. My son's in the business. My partner's son's in the business. My son is 26. Bill's son is 30. Again, to be kids. But we needed their knowledge. We needed their outlook. They're car guys, but they're not Corvette guys specifically. Lance is a Corvette guy, but he's a high performance guy, a racer guy, not specific Corvette. What was their outlook for car collecting? And it's probably more the custom compacts, trucks, cars that are more affordable, a lot of parts offered for less money, more economical to use. Corvette's not fitting that bill at all. And how do we bring the younger generation in? I'm not sure. It's a real concern. Sooner or later, our Corvettes are going to pass on to other people. And, right now we're kind of passing them on to one another. But sooner or later, we've got to get new blood in there. And how do we do that? Part of it, I think, is the education for the kids, make it more attractive, make it so. I can tell you firsthand, my daughter was the main reason, my oldest daughter was the main reason I stopped showing Corvettes. It's just like when she was like 17 years old, she said, Dad, I think I can finally come and tell you something. I'm finally old enough to communicate this to you. She said, I feel that my life up to now has been abnormal. You dragged me around to all these Corvette shows, and it was true. We went to every National Council convention that there was, and just about every weekend we were showing. She said that, I don't have normal friends, every place we go, it's like the Corvette people, the Corvette people, the Corvette people, and so that was it. I mean, that day was an enormous change in my life. I thought if she was that down on Corvettes, she's the only, I've got 3 children, she's the one that just care less about having a Corvette. She doesn't have a Corvette. The other 2 do. I've got another daughter and of course my son that love Corvettes. But that day I said, okay, I'm not going to overexpose the kids anymore. I got to do it, go back in the closet. I got to play with my Corvettes away from the kids and do normal things with them. And that's the way I was. But what we have to do is not overwhelm them. We have to somehow introduce them. Or we don't have much of a future. Concern a couple of years ago, again, we have to thank Dave Hill and the whole crew, the whole Corvette engineering group. We have a car. I was concerned. This was part of my business. I mean, I'm going to get along fine in life if Corvettes in Carlisle ceased now. I mean, we got all the other swap meets and everything, but inside, I'd get hurt pup because Corvettes are, they're in there. There's nothing in there like Corvettes, it seems sometimes. I love Corvettes, but man, if they didn't make the C5, where would we be? We'd be worshiping these cars as they got older, and then there really would never be a market, and probably the hobby would be on a downhill slide and never turn around. Corvette Museum, we touched that. Corvette Museum needs our help, support, whatever way that means. If you don't belong, please join. If you haven't been there, get there. Fly flying to Nashville, go see it. It's stupendous. The only thing wrong with it, and I've told them this several times, and I think it'll be addressed sooner or later, there's not enough turnover of Corvettes in there. You know, you bring them in for the grand opening 5 years ago. I don't want to see those same damn cars next year. We're celebrating 5 years. I mean, I love Corvettes, but you're not going to draw me back time and time again to see the same cars. You get to see different cars. You get to see quality cars. This is not the place for fun display inside the Corvette Museum. That's not fun. That's cars, significant part of my history. Outside, I encourage them all the way to a fun display outside. You know, that's what it's all about. Corvettes in racing. This probably doesn't interest everybody, but I have to say that Corvettes wouldn't be as popular today if Corvettes weren't raced. Corvettes weren't powerful. People like Gulfstream and Thompson and everybody there on down didn't hop on these cars and make them very visible in racing. Starting in 1956 all the way to current day, it's been pretty strong. Current day is really, really weak. The only thing that's really going on in pro racing, I'm not talking about amateur racing and autocrossing, because that disability is not what I mean. I'm talking about national disability, the Corvette Challenge, the World Challenge. Trans Am's the only thing that's happening today. And Jevelosi's doing a great job there. You look at that car, sure, to the world, it's a Corvette. It ain't even a Corvette. It's not. It's a Taurus on the NASCAR track at Taurus. There ain't no way. I mean, you know, if you're really into Corvettes, you're not going to believe that's really a Corvette. It's just a race car. It looks like a Corvette. What we need to do is get the C5s out there in racing. And those C5s are, 3 years old now? I wish Dave was sitting here, because I just, honest to God, think they've got to get on beat and get these cars back in racing. That's a personal opinion, but the Corvette Challenge served a lot of purposes other than being on the TV, on ESPN. They also served the purpose of a test bed for the cars. You know, the things that broke during the Corvette Challenge, those cars were being abused past the point any of us would ever use them on the streets. If they had a leaf spring that was failing, they went back to the engineers and said, we have strong leaf spring, and they would produce it. That's my soapbox on racing. I don't know that it's essential to the future of the hobby. It's certainly not, but it certainly is a plus if they get back into it. Again, we have to thank Ed Group for continuing the production of Corvettes. Let's hope there's a C10 sometime. Future of Corvette restoration. It's kind of an interesting topic. I think that the shops are hurting and have been hurting for the last 5 or 10 years. The people that just specialize in Corvette restoration. Why? Used to have lines of cars. As a matter of fact, in most cases, they used to have cars lined up inside their shops. You couldn't get your car done. You couldn't get it out of there. In my case, anyway, for 2, 3, 5 years sometimes, you had to hammer to get the car done. Restoration to me is a body off, total restoration. They can't make money at that, okay? Where do you make money in your shop? It's wrecks. You know, you do me a favor a lot of times doing a really, really magnificent paint repair or whatever, but that's not where you make your money. And I don't see you getting into the body off restoration business except for your own car, right? Correct. And the reason is, at the rates that they can get in repairing wrecks, why would you? And nobody's going to pay that. I mean, if you have to pay $50 an hour to restore your car, and your car's not going to be worth anywhere near close to what you have in it on the far end, you're not going to do it. So there's a lot of restorative cars out there that are, I guess, eventually going to be just unrestored cars, right? I mean, if sooner or later they're going to be bought by somebody, they're going to be driven. All these neighbors' cars, that the 67s especially, the big blocks, I'm seeing some of them now purchased by people that just take them out and drive them. And, you know, the prices are at the point where you can almost do that. I think a nice neighbor's restaurant, I'm talking a really nice, $435, probably in the 75 range. It used to be almost double that. So the people that started with a $50,000 car and put 50 into it, now they got 100 in it, and their car's worth 150. That made sense. Now what's happening is you're still going to start with a $50,000 car. You're going to put 50 in it, it's going to worth 75. That doesn't make any sense. So you don't do it. So what's the future there? It's hands-on. It's do it yourself. And obviously, there's plenty of people do it yourself, or there wouldn't be, swap meets that support that, or the mail order. So the cars will always need maintenance. Well, they always need restoration. A lot of them have been restored. And don't look at that as a business that, in my vision, I'd be getting into it, that I would be starting a Corvette restoration shop, because I don't think there's that kind of big future. And yet, the best guys would dispute that because there's a place for everybody. And the last is the future of Corvette investing. Crystal ball again. My vision always was, from experience, that even a dummy could make money by something like that. I mean, I don't care who you are. When I started, my 53 Corvette won for $5,000. Now, it made me not a national hero, but certainly a hero at work, and a hero with my wife. And 3 months later, I was on a $10,000 car. So that's what started this sickness with me. I thought this could happen again, you know, and it does. Sometimes it's, you know, for me, I'm really lucky because I'm visible and a lot of nice cars come to me. But anybody could have done what I did back then. You know, what I would do is use a Corvette, let's say it was 67, 435, and it had 50,000 miles. It was a beautiful car, and then another one come along. It was a 67, 435, and it had 20,000 miles. So I could sell that other car, make the money on it, and turn it over into the one that had 20 on it, and not pay much out of pocket. Today, it would take a lot of money out of pocket to do it. Today, no, not today, 87, we saw people getting out of the stock market for what reason? The market just went south in a big hurry, and that whole group came in. I would guarantee every one of them sitting in this department. And it wouldn't be. We are Corvette people. We're the ones that had the Corvettes before 87. Most of us kept our Corvettes through the era of 87 to 90, when the Corvettes were shooting up. And then in 90, when the market started recovering, where did the money go? It got out of Corvettes and went back into the market. Now, I would have said that's never going to happen because it never had happened. You know, arts and pieces of valuable art, collectibles, always went up in value. And then all of a sudden, they went up so dramatically that they had to correct. They did correct. What's going to happen now? I've said, my prophecy was that it would happen. I mean, when you see a stock market, I remember the stock market when it couldn't break 2,000, and that was only a few years ago. And now it's, you know, over 8 and dropping. What's going to happen? I don't know. I don't know anything at all about the stock market. I mean, I learned to get out of it. That was all I learned. If I lose, and I was putting my money in my Corvette, I was putting my money where I knew it was sound. I can go out and look at it, and I can polish it, whatever. You know, it's fun. It's a lot more fun than knowing the stock. I hate losing money in the stock market, so I'm just not there. You know, by retirement, I have stock market, but that's it. So I'm concerned about the stock market, but what's going to happen? If that stock market takes a hit for 3,000 points or something, what's going to happen? The Ferrari's going to be the first ones, the Duesenbergs, and I really think most of them are already on their way. And my prophecy is if that market goes much further south, you're going to see top-end Corvettes start going up. I probably will attend Corvette Mike's seminar here a little later this morning just to see if he's going to catch on to that too. I mean, I think it's, but again, if we're the people that in 87 didn't sell, obviously didn't buy. I don't think many of us bought collector Corvettes back then. And maybe most of the people here have C5s. I don't know. C5s are cool. I mean, that's really what it's all about, to drive the car. But I think there's a big cross-section here. I know there's one guy here that has a great deal of wonderful collector Corvettes, and I know I do too. What's going to happen in the future with them? I don't know. I frankly don't care what happens 100 years from now. You know, I hope there's a Corvette hobby, and I hope my grandchildren are involved in it, or my great-grandchildren. But I know where I'm going to be 100 years from now. You know, there's no question about it. And so why do I care? If you spend your life meaning so much to you, I honestly do care. And again, my prophecy is as we age, if something doesn't happen soon to bring youth into the Corvette hobby and understand solid action Corvettes in big years, and that's where the educational process is where I applaud Dr. Crispin probably more than anybody trying to educate the youth into it. I don't know whether you can educate them. You've got to feel it. You've got to have it in your blood. If their target is a Volkswagen Golf with 18-inch wheels and hell of a stereo system and exhaust that big coming out the back, you know, that's where they're going to be. Or if what they see today is a Viper that they want, or a Celine, a Callaway, you know, that's the collector car of the future to them, not the Corvette. And I don't know. I mean, these are where there's no answers. I'm sharing. We're like probably, what, 10 minutes away from the grand finale, Jay?
You're okay.
Share. Question and answers. I've talked enough.
I think your statement about the racing the C5 and getting the Corvettes back to the racetrack is valid, because if those kids watching C-SPAN or whatever they're watching, and they see the races and see Corvettes winning, then all of a sudden that becomes something that they're interested in.
Thank you. You and I will attend Dave Hill's seminar.
There you go.
I mean, honestly, and I'm not putting them down. I know why things are the way they are, but I'm going to say it in front of the video or whatever. My personal belief is I've been watching Dodge for 5 years now. I saw Dodge come out with the Viper. I've seen Dodge come out with everything that's cool. I've seen Dodge not race in NASCAR, except for the truck. But I've seen Dodge also sponsor all these huge events. I think, aren't they?
This weekend,
Monterey.
down there in Tustin,
Right.
Chrysler Corporation.
The visibility as you open a magazine seems to be on the Viper, seems to be on all their other cars, and they're killer looking cars. At the same time, they're gaining market share while Chevrolet is losing dramatically. Chevrolet goes out on strike, and, you know, the budget, I understand budgets, I mean, they cut dramatically, so you're, you know, thank goodness for the Corvette, but that's the only salvation I see in Chevrolet and General Motors of recent time. I mean, it just seems like they're going in the wrong direction. I do understand when you have these budgets that you look first things first, but I think they're missing the boat on the visibility of the Corvette in racing. And I think what they're doing is waiting until they have problems selling some of these new Corvettes. I've heard things this weekend I cannot believe. I have heard out here from several people that Corvettes out here are 10,000 over sticker.
Yeah, dealers are trying to get 5
They're
over.
asking over. No, my neighbor bought a new C5. It killed him to pay sticker, but he paid it. Never just like bought a car for sticker.
But he would, out here.
Right.
Good. I mean, you know, East Coast, that's kind of like a no-brainer. I mean, you know, nobody's going to pay for stickers. I mean, but we did, people did for a little while, but I've heard the horror stories out here. I couldn't believe 20,000 over sticker, 10,000
I
over
think that's
sticker.
more, you know, bullshit.
I would hope so.
There's still dealers that are asking 5.
5,000 over.
And
but
hopefully they
for a
eat
black
that for
one.
a year and
No, it's, you know, but they're hoping somebody's dumb enough to come in and do it.
Yeah.
You know, that's all it amounts to.
so they're missing the opportunity of selling a sticker today when they're going to hold that car and the 99s will be out and then they'll be selling it for 500 or whatever.
Right.
So it doesn't make sense.
In regards to the kids in it, though, we were talking
Yeah,
earlier.
I was just gonna bring it up. One of the things that all of us can do, if we have a Corvette that is sitting in your garage, you're taking it out or you're driving it or something like that, one of the biggest things, I agree with you, I'm really concerned about the future of the hobby too, because the kids aren't getting into it. I remember my infatuation with the Corvette was when they first came out. And I was a little guy. And I've always loved them, you know, and someone gave me a ride. And I'll never forget. So I've been giving that big time back. But I have 2 Corvettes. One is a 69 that I'm restoring. It's getting there. It's going to be a nice car when it's done.
Except for that
I have a
bracket.
57.
Except for my bracket.
Boy, I can't wait to touch his car.
I have a 57 that's modified. It's got a Radical 350 in it. It's a stock period car. It's a beautiful car. I'll be showing it tomorrow. But there's not a kid in my neighborhood that I haven't taken out for an ice cream cone in that car. Let him listen to 7,200 RPM shift. Luckily, I've made them all. But, you know, I'll take him out. I'll pin his back to the seat. And that kid will talk about it and remember that from then on. And I think if you don't share your car with the youth, then they don't know what it is. They don't know what we're talking about. On the way down here, I was coming down 280. I'm doing 70, 75 miles an hour. I got a CHP right behind me. I get a thumbs up. He's a young guy. I got a whole bunch of college kids going to Stanford. And they're Google all over the car, but it's an old 57. You wave at it. You tell them you take the time.
Yep.
You don't poo-poo anything like that. You've got to get the kids out there in the car.
Well, but you know, the kids, you know, I have a nephew 14, I got a daughter and a niece in almost 20, both of them. Four-cylinder Hondas, like you say, the big exhaust. That's what their little boyfriends drive. That's right, and that's what they're interested in.
Yeah.
A friend of my daughter's was just at Butler racetrack near Bakersfield that we run a car at, but there's something called an Autopalooza show. It's all four-cylinder imported cars. And that's when you see a guy in a Model T now driving down the road, he's my dad's age. Guys like I am, 48, are in Corvettes, that's lusted after. That's the nostalgia of it.
Yeah.
These kids at 40 are going to be nostalgic for a Honda.
I love what you say. I think he's nailed it, really.
Yeah. It is hard to get them interested. My nephew at 14, when he comes with the race car, blah, 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 he'll go that route probably. But his friends, look at the car, neat car your uncle's got. Yeah, whatever, where's the Game Boy? Get out of the way, where's the PlayStation?
Right.
Yeah, you know. And I don't have a lot of faith in it being around as big as it is 20 years from now. I really don't, as much as I love it.
It brought me back 20 years ago at NCCC. The best thing we ever did in our club, there was a troubled children's home. Kids that were in trouble and their parents couldn't relate to them or whatever, they couldn't relate to their parents, and they were put
Well, it's always a kid's fault.
They were, yeah, right, well, that whole whatever. They were put in the home for whatever period of time it made for them to get back on track, integrated back into school life and whatever. And what we did a rally, and the kids were our navigators.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
I'm telling you, it was so good. Once a year, it was a fix, man. It was good, you know. And you take the kid out, and you know, whether you won or lose, Robin was like any other time. But they all had a wonderful time. I'd love to know, as those kids straighten themselves out, now they're all adults, how many of them might have ended up with a Corvette?
I'll bet you they remember that day.
Oh, they do. And I got the goose pimples on me from what you said about hammering the car, because all three of my kids did the same thing. I'm sorry, it wasn't with a Corvette, it was with a Cobra. But I said, this is something that you are going to experience, hang on. and at the same spot, and it was the perfect spot, and there was like a wall on the one side, the noise was a reverberation, it was just, for me, it was wonderful. And I was hoping it was the same for the kids, probably scare them so bad they'll never want to see it. But I said, once in your life, you're going to experience this, and these were the kids, when the kids were young, maybe in the early teens probably, where they would remember it. I said, this is something probably 99 out of 100 kids will never experience it. Darn it, please remember after I'm gone this ride, you know, and, you know, whether it made any difference, I know the one daughter could care less about going fast. The other two are really into cars.
What'd their mothers say?
She's not here. I don't tell this story around her. I did the same thing with my parents, Rich. Met my parents when I was young. I said the one time, I said, I'm just taking you out. Back then it was the Corvette 63 fuel car. Scared the absolute But you know, and they probably thought I was crazy or and they couldn't wait to get out of the car. But they experienced it, you know. Probably didn't do any good.
Well, I let my 20-year-old daughter drive my speedster one time with me, and all she kept yelling was, "Giddy up!" And she took it to 120 mile an hour on the turnpike.
Did she floor it?
Oh yeah.
Those things are so ungodly fast. I mean, they are such a rush. That
She got a major
twin
kick out of
turbo
it.
is
Right.
so stinking fast. And you were in it with her?
Yeah. Yeah, she's a little motorhead.
You got it back, right? I'll tell you, get away from you. Anyway, I think we probably got a group. Oh, they're taking my name down. Does that mean it's over?
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
When I went to school and gave this for my sons were quite ready for 84, so it was kept over till 85. 86, there was a lot of innovations. Bigger or stronger motor, third brake light, ABS brakes, VAP system, for good or for bad. They continue to improve. 87 was a camshaft change, which lost 5 horsepower. And of course, the aluminum heads came in 86. 88, they meant to change the geometry of the suspension. Now, when you look at an 84 and you look at an 88,
takes a lot to notice any change. But we all know under the skin that there was a lot of change, and it was changes for the better, and they were continually improving that car. When we talk about C4s, I'll stop right here and say that there are two versions of C4. There's 84 to 87, and there's 88 and on. Now, that's very important when it comes to a tremendous amount of parts, namely in suspension areas. But you just need to remember that when it comes to wheels and spacers, and you say, oh, I saw the 5-spokes on that car, I wonder what year it was. You have to remember there's a lot of things that changed in that 87 to 88 time frame as far as suspension goes. 89, 6-speed, FX3, things started coming on. Now you also know that the ZR1 just missed 89. The ZR1 was actually in theory and being considered and engineered and developed as early back as 86. So 89 was a target year for ZR1, and it actually did come out in 89, but of course in the 90 production year. Another little interesting tidbit was back in 1989, the first steps were already being taken for C5. Just to give you a clue, the C5 was of course supposed to be a 1993 version. So 89 introduced ZR1 as a 90 model. The ZR1 rear fascia was the first big major fascia change. And I'll look at the cars. What have they been doing to Corvette from 1984 all the way to 1990? They've been doing improvements under the skin. We had better interiors, we had better seats, we had better lumbar seats, we had improvements all the way through. So in 1990, the ZR1 was brought on, and there was a problem with the design staff. This car being very unique, being the high visibility car that it was, they needed some sort of a styling change. They needed something that it could call its own. But what they did was, contrary to what most people believe, is they actually stole the 91 LT1 fascia instead of what we said later with the LT1 stole the ZR1 fascia. So they gave it that. They already had it developed. They had it done. But, so 90 was the first rear fascia change, and then in 91 we got our front fascia. And as most of you all know, that stayed the same with the exception of the LT1 third brake light 91. And it stayed the same all the way through 96. Now, there's a story coming out soon in Corvette Fever that we did after some considerable research with John Heinersee, who, behind the scenes, we all know that Dave McClellan retired in 92, and that Dave Hill took over shortly thereafter. But Dave Hill's focus and the focus of Corvette in that time frame was on C5. John Heinersee stepped up and actually took over as interim chief engineer of the C4 program. This is where things got real interesting. We had the LT1 engine that had just popped in. We had our anniversary edition, which was very popular. They hadn't done that for a while, and they thought that was a good idea. You all know that they skipped the 30th anniversary. They went from the 25th to the 35th, and then they went to the 40th. And we kind of missed the 45th, but I know 50 is going to be a biggie. So the thought process was all steered towards C5, and they left John Heinersee with the same old adage: do it, make it fun, make it unique, make it faster and better, don't spend any money. So, John went about creating the 40th anniversary version. He went on to, luckily they got a couple pace cars thrown in there. The 96 year was a very unique year for John, and that was of course, last year of C4. There were a couple different things they were concerned with. Number one, who's going to go out and buy a C4 Corvette when brand new C5s were coming? So that concerned them. And they still had to pay those bills, they still had to keep that plant open, and they still had to sell 20,000 cars. So there was a mindset there that they had to think about. And the other option was, how were they going to send out C4, which was and will always be an extremely popular model of Corvette, almost as identifiable finally as the earlier versions were. How are they going to give that car a send-off with a bang? So John, in conjunction with Russ McLean and a few other folks, came to decide that they were going to develop the LT4 engine. Now the LT4 engine has some unique componentry in it, and it was a sort of a predecessor of LS1 in several ways, but not really in physical physical items. But they decided that they would do the LT4 engine, which was then known as the LS1HO, and high output. And they decided that they would put that engine out, but they run into the problem of having to engineer the car for an automatic, which means certification. Then they had to certify it for a stick shift. And they decided that if they were going to use, and they also had their LT1 version for the automatic, so they decided that they would only offer two versions of this, two versions of engines. One would be an LT1 automatic and one would be an LT4 stick. So also they wanted to make sure that anybody could order an LT4 because there was only two options that year. So as you know, LT4 went into Grand Sport and among some of the others, but for the Grand Sport they basically beefed that engine up, or beefed the performance up of that car, not in the engine. I mean, what's the difference of having a Grand Sport that has X performance potential and having a white car with the same engine? So they decided that the one thing they could do to Grand Sport to set off the performance just a little bit, both on the road course and on the drag strip, was to give the wider tires. It was that simple. So that was their answer. And of course, with wider tires came a lot of other additions, you know, the flares and the Grand Sport wheels and all that. The reason that I bring all this up is to kind of give all of you an idea and kind of see the quick evolution of C4 and how it happened for 13 years. And now we get to what the topic was, which was restoration of C4. The point being is that as we talk about all the things that we can do to our cars, how these cars are, you know, they're getting on in age. Some of them are 14 years old. Weather strippings are starting to go, and carpeting's starting to fade, and door panels are coming loose, and engines are getting a lot of miles on them, and we're starting to have some wheel bearings give out. And so there's these things are all going through our minds, and they're all going, yeah, no kidding, I'm paid for that. But so what do? Well, when we restore our cars, we should also know that we have a lot of upgrades that we can do to our cars. And we had such an occasion. These magazine articles here will depict. We had a car dropped off at our place of business, and we got a marker pretty soon. All right, I'll write down the phone numbers and all that stuff here for a couple of us. We had a car dropped off, and a lady dropped it off, had a wreck, had broken some suspension components, and through whatever reasons decided that she wasn't going to come back to pick up her car. Not only that, she wasn't going to even authorize us to just, you know, sign a work order or anything else. So we called her and we asked her, we kept in touch with her and said, please either give us the okay or come get the car. Long story short, she disappeared, never came in. We ended up lien sailing the car. Nobody came over, so we were sitting there, the proud new owners of this beat-up 86 pace car that was hit in about every bottom panel that you could hit. So I looked at the car and thought about it, and immediately went through my mind, how much fun would it be to take a C4, and after learning now and being through the whole process of C5 or C4, being able to take everything we liked, every color, every trim color, every carpet modification, anything and everything that we liked in C4, and I happen to love that dash, by the way, the pinball dash. What could we do to this car, and how well could we upgrade it? So we set about doing this. Corvette Fever jumped on the bandwagon, turned us on to all the sponsors, the aftermarket houses, Eckler's, Mid-America, BFG, Bill Stein, all the people that basically supply components to the car, either in production or in the aftermarket. Now, let me stop just for a second and talk about aftermarket. I don't know how many of you in here own a Chevelle, an old Camaro, anything like that. But as you know, there are tremendous aftermarket availability of parts for a lot of these different lines. There is none as strong as the Corvette, specifically the C4, specifically. The aftermarkets that are out there, there's virtually huge warehouses full of parts for C4s, all made by different manufacturers. You know, we know the biggies, Mid-America and Eckler's. There's Corvette Central, Corvette Connection, there's Zip products, Brakes R Us, Vet Brakes. I mean, there's just a tremendous amount of folks out there who offer us parts for our car from now on, forever. And that's good for us. The reason that happened, again, was because the C4 was for such a long period of time, and with 300 plus units out there, they saw the need for it. So we went to the aftermarket houses and we said, look, we're going to be upgrading this car, but we're going to be restoring it at the same time. And what we'd like to do is a complete makeover of the car. We want to learn what it's like and what the average guy goes through, or average person goes through, to put their car in what we consider to be really good shape. And this, believe me, was starting from the bottom. Unless the thing had rolled over, it's the only thing that hadn't had happened to it. It had sat at a body shop with the windows down in our desert and our sun and everything else for 3 months and hadn't been taken care of before then. So we started on the pictures that depict up here, just to give you a background. Interior thrashed, weather stripping gone, windows stained, pitted, bodywork all over the place, whole front end shifted over to one side, major suspension work, and then we got to the mechanical upgrades. Now, when you get a C4, depending on what year you have, the first thing that you want to do when you go to fix it, both for aesthetics, cosmetics, or anything else, and the first thing you want to consider is safety. Now, nothing is so important on a car than brakes and steering. You can push it if you have to, but it has to stop and it has to steer. And on the Corvette, those systems can sometimes be expensive. But on the other hand, there's some upgrades that you can do to them while you're repairing. You might as well do the upgrade. Specifically on brakes. Big brakes came out on the C4s in 88, I believe, wasn't it, Jerry? The big 13-inch rotors, or was that 91? 88? Yeah. And so the earlier cars had small brakes, and you say, well, how do you do that? Well, it isn't bolt-on. There are brackets available that you buy that will bolt on where your brake brackets bolt on, and the bracket is, of course, what the caliper slides into. Those brackets are currently available to upgrade. DRM offers them. I'm not sure if any of those do, but I know DRM does. These brackets are a couple $100, and what they allow you to do is they allow you to bolt on the large rotor, 13-inch rotor, and the new caliper, including the new Grand Sport black caliper that says Corvette on it. Now, that caliper in particular is upgraded. It looks, again, we said, well, they just put a paint job on it. Not so. It's also reinforced in a stronger caliper than the earlier version. So there are some advantages to moving up to Grand Sport calipers, and they do look good. But you can't see them unless, of course, you upgrade your wheels to 5-spoke. Well, how do you do that? Well, you got to buy spacers on the 84 to 87. All that is explained in here. So there are a lot of things that kind of go in patterns. But the important thing is you go get it out, get all the mechanical stuff done, get your hoses and belts done, get the radiator pulled out. How many of you guys have hot running C4s? Get up hot? Happens all the time. The C4 is a bottom feeder, as is the new Corvette today. That presents problems when it comes to cooling. Unless your system is in very good, well-kept condition, you're going to experience some problems. Radiator life is anywhere from 5 years to 8 years, depending on how you drive your car. Leaves and debris and everything get clogged up in there, and you won't see them. You look underneath and look, and you can't see it because the AC condenser covers it, or the oil cooler, or whatever. The only way you're going to see that stuff is take the top shroud off the radiator. When you look down there, especially for you waxers that have gotten in there with your Q-tips, when you go take that shroud off and look in there, you're going to get sick. It's ugly in there. Radiators are aluminum. That presents a whole different problem. You've got some steel engines out there prior to 86, and actually the blocks after that. We've got some problems there with coolant, electrolysis, and things like that. We always recommend in cooling systems that we use distilled water. An additive such as Redline Water Wetter is great, but it's always recommended. We recommend that you use antifreeze. Even with some of the additives that are out there that say you don't have to use it, aluminum blocks, specifically LT5s, promote corrosion big time. And unless you've got some super help in there with distilled water and with a mixture of antifreeze, that's what the design purpose of that stuff is both to keep the corrosion level down and raise the boiling temperature and lower the freezing temperature. So it's real important that you think about that, and we learned that through racing in the hard way, and as recently here as a few weeks ago. You don't run antifreeze in a race car, and you can get hot in a hurry because boiling temp drops to 212. So there's a lot of things there to be considered. Anyway, these are ideas as you go along. I know that everybody's got questions about their particular cars or whatever, and we'll get into a question and answer period, but I thought I'd run by some of the different items, okay? You do your mechanical first. Mechanical consists of basic maintenance, hoses, belts, radiator. Your radiator, if you've got an 88 or 89 and you've had that car for 10 years, spend $250 or $80 and put a brand new Delco radiator in that car. Do your car a favor. It depends on that radiator greatly. Air shrouds in the front, the air dams that you always hit when you're going in and out of your driveway, and then pretty soon they start out that big and they're this big. Well, that starts out taking in this much air and breaking it down to this much air. So remember that. We've had people come across the desert to go to the river or whatever, and it's a great road, and you're doing 100 miles an hour, and you hit a couple whoop-de-doos and smash on the front end, and couldn't figure it out. 15 miles later, I'm running hot. It's run hot ever since. Get up underneath and find that stuff pushed up underneath, and it's not pulling in. It needs that to pull the air. So you get your cooling system out of the way. The engine, how many miles do you have on the engine? In 1989, they came out with, or 1990, they came out with an engine called a 345 horse HO motor. Here I was in this beautiful little 88 candy red coupe, and I looked at that 345 HO motor, and it was $2,800 bucks. I said, wait a minute, for $2,800, I can bolt in 100 horsepower. I said, this one here has got my name all over it. So I called up the parts department. They said, yep, here it is, all set to go. And I said, can you tell me what they've done different from my L98 motor? Well, we can't, but Chevrolet could. So we called. Pretty soon a young man called me back, and he says, what are your plans? And I says, well, what's stopping me from bolting in this 345 HO motor? $2,800 bucks, man. You can't hardly rebuild one for that. And he said, well, let me get back to you and let you know. He called me back about a half hour later, and he said, sir, I don't really know how to tell you this, but the 345 HO motor is basically an L98. And I said, well, how come my L98's rated at 245 and this one's rated at 345? He said, well, we can't go into the details, but it has something to do with the method in which it was dyno tested. Meaning, bottom line, that was with an intake manifold at 750 Holley, headers and no accessories on the front of it. So you can get 345 out of an L98, but put all the emissions and the fuel injection, everything that we have on there, and they do run 345. So at that point, the 345 HL motor was a drop-in replacement for that car, and it did run extremely well. They've changed that from ZZ2 to 3 to 4 now, so I don't think that that's the case anymore. But point being is GM does offer some engines out there. Rebuilders, not that there aren't good ones out there, and certainly we have some aftermarket tuners who are excellent, but everyday rebuild shops, everyday upholsterer shops, carpets, beeps, lube and tunes, those kind of places, $49 transmission services, $29 brakes, free hot dog. You've got your Corvette in there, guys. You need to be real careful about who's doing what. You need to walk into that shop, you need to look around. You need to see what they're dressed like, you need to see where their floor mats are, you need to see what inside that shop looks like, you need to see what kind of people are there, what kind of cars are in the parking lot. It's your baby. We know that. A lot of shops don't. There's shops that are great out there that maybe don't work on Corvettes every day. Maybe you've got a buddy who takes special care of you. That's wonderful. You've got a Corvette, you've got a technician that knows your car, stay with them. You've got a problem with your Chevrolet service manager, give them a second chance. Nobody's so important to us owning a Chevrolet than Chevrolet dealerships. Know what the reputation they have, know what kind of problems they have. So if you know that, just consider them when you go in there. Give them a chance. Sir, this is my baby. I want to talk to you. Can I talk to you heads up? You know, let's talk to you. You have a technician here that's trained in this area. How long has he been with you? What kind of certifications does he have? Just explain to the service manager that this isn't your old beat-up Chevy pickup truck. This is your baby, and it's hurt, and you don't like it when it's hurt, and you feel bad, and you want it fixed, and you want it back home in your garage in the same condition that you left it with. So give them a shot. Now, after the 6th or 7th or 8th time, you're on your own. Take a hammer in there. I don't care. But, you know, the point is that there's a lot of shops out there. I own one. 99% of the work that leaves our place is we feel to be the best it can possibly be. There's always that 1%. All we ask is that you give us a second shot. Give us a chance. Anything can go wrong. Even new parts can be bad. You tear a car apart, put it back together, that's an awful lot of things to remember to unbolt, tighten it, put back, and do all those kind of things. But that brings apart the other thing. The ZR1 owners are really learning this. All these things we're talking about, maintenance, brakes, shocks, belts, hoses, all these different things. A lot of you folks might want to give it a shot. You ever turned a wrench before? Well, sure, you know, I had my little red wagon, and I had my twin bicycle, and I had my go-kart, and I had my old Chevy. Who better is going to take care of your car than you? So, how do you do that? You ask questions, you get help, you talk to your buddies, you have a guy in a Corvette club. You use a lot of common sense and logic. You realize that usually the least price is not the best. If it sounds too good to be true, we all know it is when it comes to Corvette. So be very careful. But on the other hand, there's some great buys out there. Some of the aftermarket brake systems that are out there that Mid-America sells, for instance, a complete caliper set, stainless brake lines, master cylinder, fluid, the whole thing, $549. Gentlemen, that's $300 under my cost on a good day. So, you know, who's it made by? Oh, it's Acme Gizmo. Okay, wait a minute, have you got Delco? Oh, you do. Well, how much is that? $100 more? I'll take that. Point being, common sense and logic. You guys are the judge of what happens to your car. So, other things that you're going to do mechanically, transmissions need to be serviced, clutches need to be changed, shocks, Bilstein shocks, they all leak. I don't know how many of you walked in this place and had to buy shocks because somebody said, look, they're leaking. They're designed to leak. But as a consequence, that stuff doesn't get generated inside. Eventually, it gets low. Bilstein shocks are not that expensive, contrary to belief. They are if you go to a dealer. They're not if you direct. Go to one of the mail-order houses or a Bilstein rep. You get some brand new replacement shocks for your car for $100 a piece. Bilstein is the best they make. We found original equipment. The car was designed and engineered with that stuff on your car. Everybody says, well, what kind of tire do you recommend? Well, granted, the Gators have been superseded by GSEs, but we do recommend GSEs on Corvettes. We think they're wonderful. Some of the earlier vets may not have those options to them, but we feel strongly towards the cars that the wheels and the tires that these cars were engineered with. Also, the bigger the better, provided they fit and don't rub. So if you do want to upgrade and you've got the room or you're going to upgrade your wheels, think about that too. Normal maintenance on the car is kind of self-explanatory. You guys all know if you got an engine with 150, 60,000 on them, your valve covers have been leaking forever, those kind of things. You puff that little blue smoke when you go to start it up in the morning. You try not to look in the rearview mirror. I know, I've been there, seen all that. Valve seals have a problem, common sense. You got 110,000 miles on your engine. You're blowing a little blue smoke. You're drinking not that much oil. You know, you use a half a quart in between oil changes. It's got a little rattle to it. What do? Leaking a little oil here and there? Well, your choice. You want to go into the engine, you know it needs a timing chain, you know it needs some of these things along the way, what's going to happen? You're going to go in and spend $400, $500, $600 on your engine. Well, maybe you're going to do a valve job. What about the rings? What about the bearings? What about all this stuff? So it's your turn and the one question that I ask everybody, there's two questions. The first one is, how do you drive your car? Because when the guy says, well, I'm going to put 100 miles a year, it's going to last you another 50 years, the way it sits. But the other thing is, well, I drive it and I want to keep it. That's the key word. So if you hear keep it, then it's time to make a decision to upgrade. So you do all your mechanical work and you get that squared away. What's next? Usually, we look at the interiors. And that all may depend on your cars. And you've got interior and exterior, obviously. There's something else. Also, that's styling cues and functionability of, say, lighting. You want to change a fascia on the outside down the road. You may not want to go in and do a lot of work to the exterior lenses and things that you have now, but you're going to change the style. The fascia to, say, a new model, the square rectangular taillights, you may want to go with the export lighting that gives you a lot more function. You know, looks better, gives a little color to the back of your car. So you think down the road what you want to do, and that tells you what you're going to do with the interior and the exterior. Weather stripping, they've made a lot of changes to weather stripping. There's a lot of upgrades on weather stripping. There's also a lot of tricks to putting another weather stripping on that will improve it for years to come. How many of you guys have C4s that leak right in front of where the corner of the windshield is right there? Pretty common. There's a reason and a way that happened. There's a reason that it happened, and there's a way to fix that. Real simple. You're going to pull your weather stripping off. Anytime you're going to do a windshield or a paint job or whatever, you're going to pull your weather stripping off, guys. So you pull that weather stripping off, you're going to put the new style on there. But you're also going to take a little bit of dum-dum, a little bit of putty of some type. We use air conditioning wrap, any kind of soft or pliable type of stuff that may harden up. And we just, right there in the corner, lay a little bead on both corners just to raise that up a little bit. You'll see on the car we're going to go out and look at after we're done here. You'll see how that sets it up a little bit and seals it real nice. There's no more water leaks, even on a convertible. So there's a lot of little tricks to doing this. And I'm going to write a couple numbers down here. In case any of you don't know, Jerry Watts is sitting right here from the National Corvette Museum. Jerry is a guy that took me as an owner that walked in and said, wow, I just bought a Corvette. And I said, well, Sonny, you ever have any questions, give me a call. That relationship in 1990 has brought my business and my knowledge and everything where it is today based on what he helped me with and took the time to walk me through the plant and show me these things, and he was there for the million phone calls that we needed. He's been out to the shop to give our guys on-site training. We've had all of our guys go back to Bowling Green when he was at the Action Center, and he gave them full plant tours, got inside and in behind the scenes and showed them how things happen. No better knowledge for a Corvette tech than to go through that and see how they put together from scratch. So bottom line is, find somebody who knows what they're doing, somebody that's got the training, somebody that shows you that they're clean, neat, presentable, and that they can do the job you're looking for in the car. Now we get to interior. Again, thanks to C4's body staying pretty much the same, we have the options of doing a lot of things. You know, the most important part of your interior are your door panels and your seats. There were a lot of different colors available through 84 to 96. Some of them are not strictly bolt-in type of, the seats themselves change configuration. So when you go to think, well, you know what I want to do is put one of those white leather seats that I saw in the 92, it may not fit in your 88. So you need to talk with somebody about that and figure out what the ups and extras are. And again, Jerry's answering questions at the museum, and of course we're at the shop, and the magazines do a lot of good work. You see a lot of good retrofits and stuff in the magazines that kind of lead you in the right direction. Carpeting, available all over the place. Carpeting is not hard. You guys would really be amazed at how much fun it is to replace the interior or do the work in the interior yourselves. Pull your seats out, the 4 bolts and a couple of seatbelt bolts, and you're looking at the interior of the car. You can actually pull your carpeting out, put your carpeting in, use a spray adhesive, you can tuck it underneath all the panels. Basically, the only thing you really want to be concerned about when you do an interior or when you work on a Corvette specifically is that most of the stuff is plastic, and if you go to tighten that screw just a little bit too much, it'll never be the same. So you'll either strip it or you break the trim piece that it's securing, so you want to be real careful about that. But again, this is something you guys can do at home. This is something that'll save you some money. And a lot of times you go to an upholstery shop, they may never have even done a vet before. So you could probably do as good. The aftermarket, Eckler's, Mid-America, Alcock Interiors, there's some people out there that put out some tremendous products. You can upgrade from the one style of carpeting, I don't know what they called it back in the earlier days, to the new double loop style that's a lot tighter and it looks a little bit better, or you can keep your car original. On the car you'll see outside, we upgraded that to a completely different color. The entire interior of that car is a different color, and that's the hardest thing to do. If at all possible, I would recommend that you stay with the original color of your car, interior-wise. And the reason for that is that a lot of the trim pieces are no longer available. Little plastic things that go here and there and all that, they are not available, but in color. They are available in paint to match. So you end up buying some dye or some paint or whatever they supply you with, and it sounds like a really great idea, and you put the preps on there and you wipe them down and you do all the prep work that you can do, and you spray that stuff on there and you think you've done wonderful, and you put it on the car, and the very first time you brush up against it, you're looking at the original color it was. So we've tried that. We haven't had very good luck with that. We don't promote dyeing those parts at all. If I was going to paint some interior parts of my car, I'd use automotive paint. Real automotive paint, as in professional stuff that a body shop would put down for you. Don't even know how long that would last, but I know it lasts a lot longer than the dyes that are on the market. The car that we have out here, we had the manufacturer of the door panel. At the time the door panels are being manufactured, do the door panels and change the color for us because it was not available what we were looking for. We changed it to Arctic white, bright white. We all know there was an 88 that was white, but it wasn't real white, it was an off-white. It was an ivory color. So we wanted bright white. The seats were available in 92 and 3. But 3 had the 40th logo in the seat. We wanted, just a conventional white, so we bought the 92 white seats. We needed the door panels to go on with it, and they did those for us. They did a wonderful job, and they're holding up great, and I don't know how they did it, but it worked. Would they be available to do it again? I'm sure. Everything's available. You just talk to the guys and tell them what you want. We had to pay up front with no guarantees and everything else, and we did that, and we were real satisfied with how it turned out. So you got your interior done, you got your mechanical stuff done, and now it's Christmas time, and your wife's going to buy you a paint job. And Earl Scheib does a paint job for, what are they up to now, $129.95? Another joke. When I grew up here in Southern California, I mean, it was one day auto body, $39.95. In reality, painting a Corvette is much like building a building. You have to start off with clearing the land. You have to build a very strong and firm foundation, and then you worry about what color windows you're going to use when you get all done. Painting a Corvette is not easy. Going rate for a paint job on a Corvette, again, C4, I'm going to say the last few people that have come talk to me have told me $4,000 to $5,000 for a good paint job. A lot of people come in and say, well, I'm going to have it done by so-and-so down here for $2,000. We can usually spot, I should say, you can get a $2,000 paint job. Now, you've had to grow up with this guy. You had to marry his sister. You got to be living in the back of his house and owing rent. Because those days are gone. To do a Corvette C4 paint job correctly takes hundreds of hours. Just the materials alone are $500 or $600, and that's if you want red, it's more than that. So it's an undertaking. And what's the first thing you see when you pull up to that beautiful house that you want to buy, and you're sitting in your car and you pull up, and there's big high weeds in the planter? It ruins the whole rest of the visit. Well, the same thing with Corvette. Same thing with your paint job. When you look at this car, both from a distance and up close, if you scrimped and saved and maybe didn't have somebody who was real good to do it, you're probably not going to be as happy as you would. Going rate on a C4 paint job is anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000, depending on what you want to do to it and how bad shape it's in. Some real good painters will strip your car down. They will not use chemicals, because chemicals will eat into the fiberglass. They'll use mechanical methods of stripping that paint down. They will take every lens, every weather stripping, the belt off the middle of the car. You don't know what they mean by the belt. The black, or later models have the wide molding around the car. They'll take the exhaust down. They'll take all the lights out of the front. A lot of times they'll loosen the front bumpers. They'll take the inner fenders loose. They'll take part of the interior door sills out. I mean, they'll go through and spend 3 or 4 days disassembling your car. And just to get access to what they need to do the job. Now they'll go in and they'll start off with a series of sealers and primers. They'll block the car, meaning what's blocking? Blocking is taking a long strip of flat material, whether it be rubber, wood, or whatever, and they will put sandpaper on it. They will take your car and they'll prime it with gray primer. They'll take black spray paint and they'll fog the car, and they'll just make little foggy patches on here. Then they will take this long, flat tool and they'll block sand your car. They're blocking it with a block. In other words, they're flattening and they're seeing wherever the black is, they know they've got a low point. This all becomes very important later on when you get the clear coat on and you buff the car and you go, look at my front bumper, it's all wavy. Well, that's the other thing. When you go to do a paint job on a C4, there's 2 problems you're up against. One's called the front fascia and one's called the rear. They're both made of polyurethane. You sit out in the sun, ultraviolet rays attack them. You waited a long time when your car needed paint. The first 2 things that faded were those fascias. Let sun beat into them, and guess what? A lot of times when it's a chalky color, you can't see them. But if a cushion on one of these chairs was done in vinyl, we could see every little mark from across the room. Same thing with your cars. What do? You can buy new ones from GM, and you can buy fiberglass ones. There's pros and cons to each, your choice. Fiberglass looks really cool, nice and hard, easy to clean, does all the things that polyurethane would do, except it doesn't bend. So little rock chips hit in front of it, and when it doesn't bend and doesn't give any, those become little, we'll see on the car out here, thanks to a blowout on the car in front of me on the way up here. Sometimes new paint doesn't give a lot like the factory paint can do. By the way, factory paint, I know appearance-wise, we all complain about the orange peel or whatever. Factory paint is as durable a paint as you'll ever see on your car. So if your car is marginal and you can bring it back by hand and you can take care of it, or you don't really need a paint job, but you thought it might be neat to change the color, think twice. Factory paint is the hardest and most durable that your car will ever see. So anyway, we get into the painting process. The car is painted. You pick your colors. You'll see on the car out here, the guy that does my paint is an artist. He's an exceptional painter. It takes 6 to 8 weeks to have him paint a car. He's like clockwork, and you get it back. He's amazing. We wrote about him in the magazine here. We did that issue in in black and white. We didn't want anybody to know what color we were going to paint the car. And we actually built this car as a surprise. The whole time my wife, who's standing in the back there, was running our offices, and we called the car codename Wreck. This is the Wreck. We'd order parts, and I'd say, get me this for the Wreck and that for the Wreck, and she thought it was just a magazine article. But as we alluded to in the story, we had a surprise at the end of this project. And Jerry had come out and helped us with it, and all the guys in the shop had donated their time, and GM was giving us parts at cost, and we were putting this car together and wrote this beautiful story about it. And in the last paragraph, we explained that we did promise a surprise. The surprise was that finally, my wife, who we have lots of Corvettes and we work on them every day, finally got her own very own Corvette. And she didn't find out until we had everybody over the house for barbecue, and we were all sitting there. In the very last issue, these plastic issues here, we even had her model in the car to take some pictures for the magazine, and all this time she had no clue. And as we had everybody here, she started looking around and wondered, why were all these people here that, you know, were all these Corvette buddies and suppliers and everything? And then when they handed her that, and actually one of them read it aloud, and she realized that for the first time that car was hers. So it's been hell getting. I love driving it, but I don't get to very often. But what it represents again is a start to finish restoration plus improvements of everything that we thought we liked in C4. We put aftermarket components on the vehicle. We put keyless entry system. We've done a lot of things that, you know, came along later that maybe due to certain electronic problems we weren't able to go factory, so we went aftermarket. So that's what the car represents. I figured we'd go out there before the session ends and you guys can take a look. But I'd like to open this up to questions and answers now. And I think between Jerry and I, there's not too many things you can ask we couldn't help you with. But open.
Who do you like for a manufacturer of door panels and carpet sets?
We've used a lot of different ones. A lot of the aftermarket houses that we use actually buy from the same place. So we go direct, Auto Accessories of America. They're the ones that did a real good job. Now I might mention on door panels, they don't fit as good as the factory ones do. Don't know why. You know, when you're building 20,000 cars a year, maybe the tooling you use or the engineering that you did or whatever is superior to building a few sets for the aftermarket. I don't know, but we find that on an awful lot, so be prepared. If your stuff's good, keep it. If you need to replace it, then shop around and do quality, but we've had good luck with Auto Accessories. Yes, sir.
I have an 87. What are the pros and cons of going to coil?
There's two different ways to do suspension on a car. There are several more than that, but the two primary ways are to have a shock absorber and a monolith spring like we have in our Corvette. You know, the old days you used steel springs and shackles and that kind of thing, but in the late model we're discussing C4 Corvette. So the engineering ease and acceptability of the ride, comfort, they use the monoleaf or multi-leaf, actually monoleaf in the late model, and they actually have different rates for those leaves. So 84s with C51 had a green leaf and a green dot on it, and some of the other ones had that. So there is some availability there. You might want to be real careful. But when you build a car for production, you've got a little old lady over here, and you've got the speed demon racer over here. Chevrolet tends to want to go right about here. So there is room to go both ways. We've had people who have gotten a late model Corvette and said, oh, this thing's so terribly loud. We've had little old ladies get in there and say, I miss the room. Where's the room? This car's too quiet. So it's a lot of choice there. But to answer your question, the monoleaf and the shock absorber system that they use was for general all-around performance and general all-around comfort. But what happens, coilover develops a truly four-way independent suspension system. In other words, you're isolating each corner of the car with a shock and a coil spring over that shock, and now the A-arm and everything, there is nothing to transmit other than actually body torque movement, which our cars have, by the way, convertibles especially. But it now, with a coilover system, creates a four-wheel independent area that we can use. We're going to stiffen the front springs up because we've got engine and stuff on top of those. We can loosen the back springs up. So we've got a little more play back there as we don't have much weight. So it brings a big adjustability to the suspension. How many of you with late models, 93s, 4s, 5s, think that they ride too high? You know, there's that much room between the tire and the fender well. Well, that's there, so it has shock travel. It's smooth, it's more comfortable. You want to go to that speed demon thing, or you want just strictly more performance from the car? Coilover suspension will give you that. It will give you an adjustability that's far superior to that. You can change your spring rates for depending on what you want to do. If you have FX3 suspension, there's another method of adjustability for there. We can revalve your shocks and change those whichever way you need them to be changed. FX3 modules can be reprogrammed. You can buy prompts for those just like you can for your ECMs. They can change the shock valving, how it rebounds, and those different components of the shock travel itself. And even with FX3, again, it was in the middle of the road. There's plenty of improvement and plenty of software you can go. So, is there an advantage? I asked that famous question, how do you drive your car? Well, I've never been on a racetrack. Well, then I don't know that you're going to benefit from $2,500 with a coilover suspension. In fact, you may find it to be a deterrent because it may take away. But you know, we used to use a little graph, and on one hand it was durability, and then the other counter was performance. And we used to say, well, this car has this much of whatever we want it to have. So if we turn it down to where we get full durability, we see where the outer marker is for performance. If we turn that graph back up to performance, we find out where durability is. Now that's somewhat changed, but not a lot. We take a race car, we take an engine and a chassis, and we develop it to the highest extremes that we can. We find out that it's also can be very finicky, can be very brittle, and can be very problematic. So it all depends. You beef an engine up, you take away from durability. You take away from reliability possibly, and you take away fuel economy and that kind of thing. But you gain the seat of the pants. So same goes with suspension. What do you want? You want to go out and do some autocrossing? You want to go to Rupert School and learn how to drive and go out and do some track time stuff and have some fun? You need it. Put some brakes on there too while you're there. Yes, sir.
How do you feel the fact that the C4 chassis is so far out of square relative to the body?
Well, there was a joke we used to say that was, don't ever get your car aligned for the first 2,000 miles when it's brand new. A lot of things happen. On one point, cars never align so well as it is at Bowling Green. The reason being, it's one of the only places that your tires will actually be turning while the alignment is being adjusted. Think of that. So, you don't have any friction there, you don't have any slide plates, you don't have anything there to worry about. Your wheels turning nice and slow, and that guy's underneath there, and this is the 99th car he's done today. And he brings that baby up to exactly perfect, hits the blow gun, and he walks away. You'll never be that good again until it gets on the transporter to come see you. And when they lock those babies down, and there isn't that much room between them now, between the tires and the fenders, there's this much. And that's because they are clamped down so tightly. Well, the Corvette's frame isn't very rigid, relatively speaking, to a lot of others that we're used to, especially C5. It is subject to movement. There are some very critical adjustments that need to be done on alignment. For instance, we have one guy in our whole area that we send to have our cars aligned. We do a four-wheel alignment, and our cost is $135. It takes him about 3 hours to properly align the car. And on the other hand, Rupert can take the car, and he can take a string and a tape measure, and he can come so close that it's scary. But this is years of experience and a lot of knowledge about how this car works. So alignments are critical. Just because you go down to JC whatever and you get your alignment done and they tell you it's perfect, and your tires have always been wearing, and it's that damn car's fault. A lot of times it isn't.
Well, I mean, I have, I don't know if you answer it, but I know my alignment is right on the money, but yet I can stand in front of the car and I have 11-inch wheels, 11-inch rims, 315s, and I can see, you know, the right front's sticking out 1.5 inches and the left front's 1/2 inch. Go to the back, it's the other way around.
Then your alignment's not right. I mean, you can set a car up sideways and have all the wheels aligned right.
No, I checked that. So they're
I
not.
don't know what the answer to that question would be. If you've got a wheel that's sticking out like that off the body and
No, I mean, it's just parallel. I mean, they're parallel, it just locks it.
I have the same problem with an 87. I put the ZR1 wheels on with the spacers in the front, and if you look at the car from the front, and both tires aren't pointed straight beside them with the back tires, one front sticks out, closer to the edge of the hood than the other.
Yeah, and I've seen it on a dozen cars.
well, we will say that the bodies on the C4s are up to a little bit of variables. What were you going to say?
Well, what it amounts to is that's governed by how the body was originally put to the frame. The rear section, everything from the firewall back is bonded to the frame. Well, when that was set on at the plant, it's set on there by a machine, and the guys leaned up against it, put the tools against it, so pretty well it's set down, and then whenever the guy puts the bob to it and lets it set the first time. So he may not have that body exactly aligned with the frame to start out with. If he does that in the rear, if you're a millimeter off in the rear, the time you get to the front, you can be 3 to 4 millimeters off. And there's nothing can be done to change it.
A lot of times you guys will have the same problem. You go to put your aftermarket exhaust systems on. But I'm not going to vouch for their fit and finish either. But I will say that a lot of times what we run into is that every fascia on those cars seems to be different. I drive 50 Corvettes a week, and I will swear to you that 49 out of the 50 are every single bit different than each one of the other ones that I drive. They all have a personality. Every clutch feels different, every brake pedal, every gas pedal. I've never seen an L98 that runs as good as an 86. And I've driven them all. 91s, 88s, whatever. This car we have is an 86. I finally found a take-out 86 motor to build for my daughter's Z28 Camaro because I knew that thing would be a powerhouse. But, there's just something about each model car, each year car. You all have pluses and minuses, but they all are different. And from body fit to rattles, I always hear this, those LC4s all rattle. They do. None of mine rattle. But we all look at each other. We've all heard that though, haven't we? So there's a lot of things that we have to put up with C4. One of the other reasons that I think a lot of you are here today is, and it's a question that's asked of me all the time. What are we going to do with our C4s? I don't really care for the C5 just yet. It hasn't just grown on me just yet. I'm not quite sure. I can't really afford one. I'm going to wait till the prices go down. I'm not going to pay sticker. I keep hearing all these things, right? The bottom line is that your C4 to you is just as special as the 65 is to him, as the 79 is to her, as all the other things are to each other. And it took me a long time to go from my favorite car to where I accepted them all, and now I have a lot of favorites. There was no finer car ever in the world in 1990 when I drove home my ZR1, and the guy in the Chevy truck pulled up next to me with his son, went like this. There was nothing finer than that moment in that car. I still own the car, but some things about C5 I like. There's some things about that 88 that I like. There's some things about her 86 that I love. That 82 Collector was a good-looking car. A lot of things that we have to dig down deep within ourselves and figure out. Someday there'll be a C5 in the Van Dorn garage. You bet. Hopefully next year there'll be a couple race cars. But as far as personal driving, love the C4s. Got a bunch of them, 7 or 8 of them. Each one's got its own little stage of this one's perfectly custom and this one's perfectly stock. So I can kind of play all these angles.